A big stat is brought to you by IHOP. Indiana 7 straight wins heading into that battle with Washington tomorrow. Were they to win, they would tie the longest single-season win streak in school history, set in 1945 and then equaled in their lone Rose Bowl season back in 1967. That gets us to our big interview, and it would be tough to find anyone with more perspective on the Hoosiers than Don Fischer. He has been the voice of Indiana football and basketball for more than half a century. And Fish, you know, I think about this, and I'm curious what this has been like for you. I mean, you think about the teams through the years, and Bill Mallory had some nice teams. The team during the COVID year was a really exciting team. But let's just be honest. You've called a lot of games through the years in, shall we say, less than full stadiums. What was it like last week to look out at Memorial Stadium, completely jammed with cream and crimson, and see Indiana annihilating Nebraska?
Well, I can tell you this, for me, for Indiana football, to have a packed house like that, to have the fans in the stands for the first time from a, sold out perspective, it was fabulous. I can't tell you how excited I am with this program right now, and obviously the success that Curt Cignetti has brought to this program at this point. It's special. There's no question about it. And I have not seen Hoosier Nation this excited about football since back in the Mallory era, back in the 80s and early 90s when they were winning.
Is there a moment that you can pinpoint so far this year, Fish, where you thought to yourself, man, this team's really good?
Well, I really went into the season, Dave, because I went to 10 of their 13 spring practices. I just wanted to see what Curt Cignetti and his bravado and talking about Google me, I win, those kinds of things. I wanted to see what kind of coach is this? This is totally different than anything I've seen in the past in so many different ways. And what I saw in those 10 practices convinced me this guy was going to win at Indiana. And I started talking that way back in the summertime and in the fall. I watched his practices in the fall as well. And I have been convinced from the time that he got here that he was going to win football games at Indiana because he is so confident in his abilities of running a program the right way, doing it with discipline and toughness and all those kinds of things. And yet he's got that ability to deal with players in a way that doesn't, push them to the side or make them feel like they're not important. He's tremendous with how he handles people and how he handles players especially. He's old school, but I think he's totally fair, and I think the players all know that.
You host his radio show, so you get to spend more time with him than most, Fish, and you've described some aspects of his personality, but I think what's really interesting to me is coaches only let the public see what they want the public to see, right? The way that he carries himself on the sideline and in the postgame. That's essentially all that we get. So could you elaborate a little bit on what he's like in those moments where you're not observing him on the practice field, where we're not involved in kind of coaching a game or getting ready to coach a game? What's he like in those moments where you guys are just sitting around taping the show? I don't know how to explain him exactly because he's got a different personality. Some would call it quirky. But I just think he is a guy that's very serious about football. He loves the game. He grew up in it with his dad being a Hall of Fame coach in Pennsylvania. He was there at West Virginia with his dad there for a time. And he is one of those people that is engrossed in the game of football, especially at the college level. And very serious in many respects, but a guy that also believes in himself totally in the system that he has brought forth. And he's brought that through the assistant coaching ranks for years, and then he became the head coach 14 years ago at Indiana University, Pennsylvania, ironically, and had nothing but success since he's been as a head coach. He learned under Saban his last 4 years. He told me on one of the talk shows that he learned more from Nick Saban in those 4 years about how to run a program, how to approach things from that perspective.
And it's been nothing but success for him since then. So from a personality standpoint, he's a little bit different, but very congenial. I mean, when I talked to him, I had lunch with him before the season started, and we've had many conversations off microphone. And he's like I said, very serious about football. I don't think anybody watches more film than he does, and he loves doing it. And I asked him if he played golf, because I'm a golfer. I love to play golf. And he said, nope, I don't play anymore. And I said, why? He said, well, I got a back injury back some time back. And he said, I just didn't play it after that. And he said, I love to watch film. And he says, I spend more time watching film than I do anything else. So that kind of tells you about what kind of guy he is and how serious he is about football.
Well, I think it's fair to say that it's paid off. They have a little different challenge this week in that they are without their starting quarterback, Curtis Rourke. As you mentioned, you've watched a lot of practices here, so you have more insight perhaps into Taven Jackson than some others would, although we saw him start 5 games last year. How equipped do you believe they are, Fish, to survive without Rourke?
Well, I think Taven, and here's Buck Sewer and I went to a fall practice this year just to watch that practice, and we watched specifically Taven Jackson just to see what kind of improvement that he has had. And he has dramatically improved his footwork at Indiana. I mean, he went to Tennessee, that was his first year in college, and redshirted that season, and then transferred to Indiana. And the next year, of course, he starts 3 games last year at the beginning of the season. Then he was taken out of the starting lineup. Brandon Sorsby came in and took his place. And yet, and you would think in this day and age with the transfer portal and NIL that Taven Jackson could have left after last season was over with and gone someplace else. He did not. He stuck around, decided he was going to be coached by Curt Cignetti, and I think he's made dramatic improvement. I mean, Tino Sinceri, who is the quarterback's coach and part of the offensive coordinator position, I'm telling you, that guy does miracle work with these players. Those guys are all great coaches. The guys he brought with him and the guy he kept, Bob Bostad, who's taken over the offensive line, those coaches know what they're doing, and they have done a tremendous job of coaching these kids up. And Taven's a perfect example of it. He comes in after halftime last week, after Curtis Rourke goes out of the lineup at halftime. He comes in, drives Indiana to 4 touchdowns in the ball game. 28 points in the first half under Rourke, 28 points in the second half under Taven Jackson. And I think I doubt that they're going to miss a beat this week. I really believe in what they do and how they go about their business. And their offense has been dynamic to this point, and I don't think that's going to change.
It has been. I want to talk a little bit about the defense, too, because I think you would probably agree. Again, you've watched more Indiana football than anyone. There have been some really dynamic offenses through the years at IU. You think about Antoine Randall. We talk about the Mallory years with Anthony Thompson. You talk about Kevin Wilson has had some really good offenses. The issue, it feels like, Fish, has been they haven't consistently played great defense. And Brian Haynes has done a pretty remarkable job. So give me a sense as to what he's done on that side of the ball, where you really can't out-scheme people. I mean, ultimately, someone's got to make the tackle.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about Haynes, and Coach Cignetti has talked about this every time he talks about Brian and the job that he's done as the coordinator, he basically gives the defense to Brian Haynes. He doesn't interfere very much. He basically trusts Haynes. That guy's been with him for years now, and Haynes does a tremendous job. I think he was up for the Broyles Award last year as the assistant of the year. He is really a good football coach, too. And this defense is fast. They are aggressive. They will do a lot of different things out there to try to fool the quarterback, to pressure the quarterback. I would say that Haynes has done their offensive or defensive line coach, my apology, Pat Kuntz has done a remarkable job with that defensive line because they lost almost everybody from the defensive line a year ago. And they used 8 or 9 players a year ago, and none of those guys, except for Marcus Burris, for the most part, is back. So what they've done with this defense is remarkable in itself. They bend but don't break very often. They've given up very few touchdowns, as you know, and this defense is, I think, ranked in the top 5 or 6 in the country right now with how they go about their business out there. So it's the one thing I do think is something that people don't recognize is how complementary this football team is, offense to defense, defense to offense. The perfect example, the 4 turnovers that they had in the game against Maryland, Maryland did not score a point, didn't have a first down, and they lost 9 yards of offense in those 4 turnover possessions for the opponent. That's amazing in itself. It tells you.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, you talk about sudden change. Like, you can't do better in sudden change. They're not giving up a single first down. Let's talk about the matchup tomorrow in Washington. Again, Indiana will have the national spotlight on them. We're so thrilled to have this game here on the Big Ten Network. What concerns you the most about Washington?
Well, they've had an extra week to prepare, for one thing, and it's a good football team. Jed Fish is a good football coach. Their offense has been productive against virtually everybody they played this year. Their defense gave up some points against Iowa, as we know. I just think that this Indiana football team is prepared for everything. And there's nobody on that ball club, based on how Curt Cignetti goes about his business, will be overconfident about what Indiana's doing and the 4-3 record that Washington has. This is going to be a tough test, and I think Indiana will be challenged in this ball game, as will the Washington Huskies. I think this is going to be an interesting matchup for those reasons alone. And on top of that, the one thing that Indiana has in their favor is the fact that they've got another sellout crowd for this football game. And Indiana hasn't had sellouts like this since the Mallory era.
Fish, I'm going to leave you with this one. As I mentioned, you've been at this for more than half a century. You've called 3 basketball national championships for Indiana. So you've been a part of some amazing moments in hoops. Have you allowed your mind to wander at all? I know this chapter's still being written, but have you allowed your mind to wander about where this season might take you and the Hoosiers?
I don't do that anymore, Dave. I used to be very optimistic about things when things were going well, and all of a sudden the roof caves in. So I'm enjoying the moment, and that's the way all Indiana fans ought to look at it. But I do think that Indiana has something special going with Curt Cignetti and this coaching staff and the players that have bought into his system. And it's a special time for Indiana football, maybe as special as it's ever been. And certainly in my career, right now, it is.
Really cool. I love that attitude. Just enjoy the journey. I know lots of Hoosiers fans are doing just that. Happy for you, Fish. Happy for all the IU fans who are watching this team this year and can't wait to see where it takes all of us on this journey this year. Thanks for lending your insights and your time. Don Fischer, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.